The emergency lights flashed red across the bridge of the Stellar Harmony, and Captain Mireille Kim felt warm blood running down her face from the deep cut on her forehead. Her purple skin had turned pale from blood loss, and pain shot through her ribs every time she tried to breathe. The ship groaned around her like a dying animal as metal twisted and air hissed out through 17 different holes in the hull. She tried to stand but fell back into her command chair when the ship shook. Again, sparks flew from broken control panels and the smell of burning circuits filled the air. Through the cracked view screen, she could see the dark shapes of the Carathian raider ships moving away into space. They had taken what they wanted and left. Her crew to die slowly in the cold vacuum. The attack had come from nowhere. One moment they were traveling peacefully through the void sector carrying medical supplies to the outer colonies, and the next moment 6 Carathian warships had dropped out of hyperspace around them. The raiders were known throughout the galaxy for their cruelty. They took no prisoners and left no survivors. Everyone knew this, but trade ships still had to travel through their territory because it was the only route to the outer systems. Mireille touched the communication panel with a shaking hand, but only static came from the speakers. The main communications array had been destroyed in the first attack run. She looked around the bridge at her remaining crew. Her navigation officer had been sucked out into space when the viewport cracked. Her weapons officer lay motionless under a fallen beam. Only she and 2 others were still alive on the bridge. Down in the engine section, Engineer Do-hyun Park was still working. She could hear him moving around through the ship's internal communication system. His 4 arms gave him an advantage when, working with complex machinery, and he was trying desperately to restore power to the life support systems. The Corvin engineer had served on her ship for 3 years and had never failed to find a solution to any technical problem. But this time, even his skills might not be enough. The ship carried a crew of 47 beings from 6 different species. Most of them were traders and diplomats traveling between the core worlds and the frontier colonies. They had families waiting for them at home, children who would never see their parents again. The thought made Mireille angry, but anger would not fix their broken ship or restore the air that was slowly leaking out into space. She activated her personal recorder and began to speak in a voice that was getting weaker with each word. Someone needed to know what had happened here. Someone needed to tell their story so the families would have answers instead of just empty questions. The Carathians had demanded they surrender all their cargo and prepare to be boarded. When Mireille had tried to negotiate, they had opened fire without warning. Their weapons tore through the Stellar Harmony's shields like they were made of paper. The trade ship had no real weapons to fight back with, and its armor was designed to protect against space debris, not military-grade plasma cannons. Communications officer Hyun-Soo Lee was hunched over his broken console trying to send out a distress signal. The young Zenthari had only joined the crew 6 months ago, but he had already proven himself to be skilled and brave. His scaled hands moved quickly over the controls as he rerouted power from other systems to boost the signal strength. Sweat ran down his green skin as he worked. The distress beacon finally activated just as his console exploded in a shower of sparks. Hyun-Soo was thrown backward against the wall and did not get up again. Mireille crawled over to check on him, but she could tell from his strange angle that his neck was broken. Another good crew member lost to Carathian brutality. She made her way back to her chair and continued recording her final log. The ship's computer was still working on emergency power and would preserve her words even after the life support failed completely. She spoke about each member of her crew and what they had been carrying in the cargo holds. Medical supplies for plague victims on Kepler Station, farming equipment for the new colony on Tau Ceti, educational materials for the schools. On the outer rim, all of it was gone now. The Carathians had taken everything of value and destroyed the rest. They did not care about the suffering their theft would cause. Children would die from diseases that could have been cured. Crops would fail without the proper equipment. Students would grow up ignorant without books and learning tools. The air was getting thinner, and Mirai could feel herself getting dizzy. In the passenger section, she could hear other survivors calling out for help, but there was nothing she could do for them. The bulkheads were sealed to prevent total atmospheric loss, and she did not have the strength to move around the ship, even if the passages were clear. She thought about her daughter waiting for her back on Zenthari Prime. Mirai had promised to be home in time for her naming ceremony, but that would never happen now. Her daughter would grow up believing her mother had abandoned her instead of knowing she had died trying to help others. The thought was more painful than her physical injuries. The ship's sensors were still partially functional, and she could see the tactical display on her personal screen. There were no other vessels in this part of space. The void sector was avoided by most travelers because of the raider activity, and the nearest patrol route was 3 days away. By the time anyone found them, it would be too late. Do-hyun's voice came over the internal communication system one last time. He had managed to restore partial power to the medical bay and some of the passenger compartments. It would buy them a few more hours, but not enough to make any real difference. His voice was calm and professional, even though he knew they were all going to die. Mirai had always respected the Corvan people for their ability to face death with dignity. She closed her eyes and tried to remember better times. Her first command assignment when she was young and full of hope for the future. The day she met her husband at the academy graduation ceremony. The moment she held her newborn daughter and promised to always protect her. Now she was breaking that promise, and there was nothing she could do about it. The ship shuddered again, and more systems failed. The artificial gravity fluctuated, causing loose objects to float around the bridge. Warning lights flashed, and alarms sounded until their power sources died one by one. Soon there would be only silence and cold and the endless darkness of space. Then something changed on the sensor display. A new contact appeared at the edge of detection range, moving toward them at high speed. The energy signature was unlike anything in the galactic database. It was massive and powerful, but not matching any known ship design from any of the major powers. Mirai forced herself to focus on the readings. Whatever was approaching was 3 times larger than a Carathian battlecruiser, and its power output was off the scale. The computer could not identify the technology being used for propulsion or weapons. It was completely alien. Fear mixed with hope in her dying heart. If this was another raider group, they were already dead anyway. But if it was something else, then maybe there was still a chance for some of her crew to survive. She activated the emergency beacon again, hoping the approaching ship would detect it and understand they needed help. The unknown vessel continued to approach, and Mirai watched the sensors until her vision started to fade. Her last conscious thought was that, at least someone would know what had happened to the Stellar Harmony and its crew. The massive ship emerged from the darkness of space, like a metal mountain moving through the void. Its hull was covered in angular armor plates that reflected the distant starlight, and weapon ports lined its sides in perfect rows. Strange markings ran along the hull in letters that none of the surviving crew could read. The symbols spelled out words in an alien script that said, UNSC Indomitable. Captain Mirai Kim drifted in and out of consciousness as she watched the enormous vessel approach. Through her failing vision, she could see that it was easily the largest warship she had ever encountered. It was longer than 3 Zenthari battleships placed end to end and bristled with more weapons than an entire fleet. The ship moved with purpose and grace despite its incredible size. The unknown vessel positioned itself between the dying stellar harmony and the debris field left behind by the Carathian raiders. A brilliant blue beam reached out from the giant ship and locked onto their hull with gentle precision. The tractor beams stabilized their tumbling motion and began to slowly pull them to safety. Then a voice came over their communication system, speaking in perfect galactic standard. The accent was strange and unfamiliar, but the words were clear and calm. The speaker identified himself as Commander Jinwoo Choi of the United Nations Space Command and requested permission to render assistance to their damaged vessel. Mirai tried to respond, but her voice was too weak and her communication console was still broken. She could only listen as the alien commander continued to speak. He said his ship had detected their distress beacon and was prepared to provide immediate medical aid and emergency repairs. His tone carried absolute confidence and authority, but also genuine concern for their welfare. Small craft began launching from the giant warship's docking bays. They were sleek and fast, with a design that was completely different from anything in the galactic database. The boarding pods moved through space with incredible precision and locked onto the Stellar Harmony's hull at multiple points. Magnetic. Clamps engaged with solid metallic sounds that echoed through the damaged ship. The first alien to come aboard was wearing an advanced environmental suit that glowed softly with internal power systems. The figure moved with quick, efficient motions as it sealed the airlock behind itself and began scanning the area with handheld devices. The alien was roughly humanoid in shape, but smaller than most galactic species. Its movements suggested incredible physical competence and training. More aliens in similar suits spread throughout the ship and began working on the damaged systems. They moved with a coordination that spoke of long practice and shared purpose. Each one seemed to know exactly what needed to be done without requiring orders or guidance. Their equipment was clearly more advanced than standard galactic technology. One of the aliens approached Captain Mirai and knelt beside her command chair. Through the suit's transparent faceplate, she could see a face that was unlike any species she had ever encountered. The features were symmetrical and expressive with eyes that showed intelligence and compassion. The alien spoke in the same calm voice they had heard over the communication system. The being introduced itself as Medical Officer Somin Nam and immediately began treating Mirai's injuries with devices that seemed to work like magic. A small scanner passed over her body and provided instant readings of her condition. Medical foam sealed her wounds and injection cartridges delivered medication that reduced her pain within seconds. Other team members were working throughout the ship restoring power and sealing hull breaches. Their tools cut through damaged metal, like it was soft plastic, and their repair materials bonded with the hull stronger than the original construction. The life support systems came back online and fresh air began circulating through the compartments again. Engineer Do-Yun Park watched in amazement as the aliens repaired damage that would have taken his crew days to fix. They worked with tools he did not recognize, using techniques that seemed impossible. A hull breach that should have required dry dock facilities was sealed in minutes with materials that appeared to be grown rather than manufactured. The alien team leader came to the bridge and removed his helmet, revealing the face Mirai had seen through the faceplate. He had dark hair and strong features with eyes that missed nothing as they scanned the damaged bridge. He introduced himself as Captain Taehyun Lim and asked about the attack that had left them stranded. Mirai found her. Voice was stronger now thanks to the medical treatment she had received. She told him about the Karathian raid and how they had been left for dead after their cargo was stolen. Captain Taehyun listened carefully and asked detailed questions about the raiders' ships and weapons. His interest seemed more than just casual curiosity. The alien captain explained that his people called themselves humans and that they had been monitoring this region of space for several months. They had tracked the Karathian raider activity and had been moving to intercept them when they detected the distress signal. This rescue was not an accident, but part of a larger operation. As the repairs continued, Mirai learned more about these mysterious humans. They came from a planet called Earth in a solar system that was not on any galactic star charts. They had only recently developed faster-than-light travel, but their technology seemed to be generations ahead of anything else in the galaxy. Their ship carried weapons that could destroy planets and defensive systems that made it nearly invulnerable. Captain Taehyun spoke about human concepts that were foreign to galactic civilization. He used words like justice and protection when talking about their mission in this region. Most galactic powers were interested in territory or resources or political advantage. The humans seemed to be motivated by something different entirely. The surviving crew members were brought to the bridge to meet their rescuers. Each human introduced themselves politely and asked about their injuries and needs. They showed genuine concern for beings they had never met before and offered aid without asking for anything in return. This behavior was unprecedented in Mirai's experience with galactic politics. Medical Officer Somin Nam had treated all the wounded crew members with the same care and skill she had shown to Captain Mirai. The humans had medical technology that could heal injuries that would normally be permanent. Broken bones were mended in minutes, and internal bleeding was stopped with injections that worked better than surgery. Navigator Sunwoo Han showed them star charts that included systems beyond the edges of known space. The humans had mapped regions that other species considered unreachable and had established monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. They knew more about galactic politics and military movements than most governments knew about their own territories. As the Stellar Harmony was prepared for transport to a safe port, Captain Tae-hyun made an offer that surprised everyone. He invited the crew to tour his ship and learn about human capabilities. Most species would have simply provided aid and continued on their way. The humans seemed interested in establishing ongoing contact and communication. The tour began in the docking bay where hundreds of smaller craft were stored in organized rows. Fighters and bombers and transport ships filled the massive space along with repair equipment and supply containers. Everything was maintained in perfect condition, and the activity level suggested a crew numbering in the thousands. They visited the medical bay where injured humans were being treated alongside the rescued aliens. The facilities were larger and more advanced than most planetary hospitals. The humans had prepared for large-scale casualties and had the equipment to handle any type of injury or illness. They treated all patients with equal care regardless of species or origin. The weapon systems were beyond anything in the galactic arsenal. Energy cannons that could punch through battleship armor and missile systems that could track targets across multiple star systems. The humans had clearly designed their ship to fight wars against opponents with similar technology levels. They were prepared for conflicts that the galaxy had never seen. Most impressive was the attitude of the human crew members. They worked with dedication and skill, but also with a sense of purpose that went beyond simple duty. They believed in what they were doing and were willing to risk their lives for beings they had never met. This level of commitment was rare in galactic civilization. As the tour concluded, Captain Tae-hyun explained that this was only the beginning. The humans had larger plans for this region of space, and the Korathian raiders were just the first target. They intended to bring order and justice to a galaxy that had operated under the rule of might makes right for too long. The promise both thrilled and terrified Captain Murray. These humans had the power to reshape galactic civilization, but their ultimate goals remained unclear. All she knew for certain was that the galaxy would never be the same after their arrival. The corridors of the UNSC Indomitable stretched for kilometers in every direction, and Captain Mirai Kim felt overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the human warship. Thousands of crew members moved through the passages with practiced efficiency while performing duties that kept the massive vessel operational. Each person seemed to know their exact role and carried it out with precision that reminded her of clockwork machinery. Captain Tae-hyun Lim walked beside her as they toured the ship's various sections. He explained human military organization in terms that were both familiar and alien to her understanding of galactic warfare. The humans had developed command structures that allowed rapid decision-making even in the most complex situations. Orders flowed down from senior officers, while information flowed up from specialists, creating a network of communication that functioned like a living organism. They entered the navigation center, where Navigator Sunwoo Han was plotting courses through hyperspace using three-dimensional displays that showed star positions in real time. The human understanding of faster-than-light travel was fundamentally different from galactic standard technology. Where other species used fixed hyperspace routes that had been mapped over centuries, the humans could calculate new paths through unmapped regions of space. Sunwoo explained the human concept of leaving no one behind as he worked on tracking the Carathian raider fleet. Every human military unit had standing orders to rescue any friendly forces in danger regardless of the risk involved. This philosophy had shaped their tactics and equipment design since they first began exploring beyond their home system. They would rather lose ships than abandon people who needed their help. The tactical center was filled with displays showing ship movements throughout the galaxy. Intelligence Officer Hein Yang coordinated information-gathering operations that reached into every major power's territory. Human reconnaissance satellites were positioned in dozens of star systems, and their data networks could track fleet movements across hundreds of light-years. The scope of their intelligence operation was larger than anything the galactic powers had ever attempted. Hein briefed them on human military doctrine, which differed drastically from standard galactic warfare. Most species fought for territory or resources, using tactics that had remained unchanged for thousands of years. Battles were often ritualized contests between honor-bound warriors who followed traditional rules of engagement. The humans had developed warfare into a precise science focused on ending conflicts as quickly as possible. Human weapons were designed to disable rather than destroy whenever possible. Their medical technology allowed them to save lives that other species would consider lost causes. Their logistics systems could supply military operations across galactic distances without requiring local resources. They had built a military machine that could project power anywhere in the galaxy while maintaining their own moral standards. The marine training facilities occupied several decks of the ship, and the sound of combat exercises echoed through the corridors. Sergeant Major Gyeong Seo led her troops through scenarios that prepared them for fighting in every possible environment. The Marines wore powered armor that enhanced their natural abilities and carried weapons that could adapt to any tactical situation. Their training was constant and intensive. Mirai watched as Marines practiced boarding actions using mock-ups of different ship designs from various galactic powers. They had studied the architecture and defensive systems of every major species and developed specific tactics for each type of vessel. The level of preparation suggested that humans had been planning for galactic intervention long before they made contact with other species. The fighter bays contained hundreds of small craft arranged in perfect formation. Squadron leader Min Seo walked them through the capabilities of human aerospace fighters, which combined speed and firepower in ways that seemed impossible. The pilots wore neural interface helmets that connected them directly to their ship's control systems, allowing reaction times that exceeded biological limitations. Fighter training was conducted in virtual reality simulators that could recreate any combat situation with perfect accuracy. Pilots fought against computer-generated opponents based on detailed analysis of galactic military forces. They practiced engagements against Carathian raiders and Zenthari battleships and Phylaxian dreadnoughts until their responses became automatic. Reflexes. The engineering sections were supervised by Chief Engineer Jisoo Yoon, who explained how human technology had developed along different paths than galactic standard systems. Where other species had focused on refining existing designs, over thousands of years humans had approached each problem from first principles. Their solutions were often simpler and more effective than traditional methods. Human hyperspace drives could make course corrections while traveling faster than light, which was considered impossible by galactic physics. Their power systems generated more energy per unit mass than anything in the known galaxy. Their computer networks processed information at speeds that exceeded the capabilities of the most advanced artificial intelligences. Every system on the ship represented a breakthrough in applied science. The ship's artificial intelligence introduced itself as Yeji and spoke with a voice that sounded completely natural. The AI managed thousands of simultaneous tasks, from navigation to weapons targeting to crew scheduling. Its computational abilities allowed it to analyze battlefield situations and suggest tactical options faster than any organic mind could process. The humans worked with their AI as a partner rather than treating it as just another tool. Captain Tae-hyun revealed that the Carathian raider fleet had been tracked by human deep space reconnaissance platforms for several months. Their attack patterns and supply routes had been mapped in detail, and their weaknesses had been identified and cataloged. The rescue of the Stellar Harmony was not a random encounter, but the opening move in a carefully planned operation. The human captain explained that his people had been observing galactic civilization for over a year before making their presence known. They had monitored communication networks and studied political relationships and analyzed military capabilities. They had concluded that the current system was fundamentally unjust and needed to be changed. Most galactic governments maintained order through strength and fear rather than law and justice. The strong preyed upon the weak, while authorities looked the other way or demanded bribes to provide protection. Pirates and raiders operated freely in regions where government forces were spread too thin to maintain security. Millions of beings suffered under systems that prioritized profit over basic rights. The humans offered an alternative based on principles that were revolutionary in galactic politics. They believed that civilized beings had a responsibility to protect those who could not protect themselves. They viewed justice as something that should be available to everyone, regardless of their species or economic status. They were willing to use their superior technology to enforce these principles throughout the galaxy. As the briefings continued, Captain Mirai began to understand the scope of human ambitions. They were not interested in conquering territory or collecting tribute like traditional military powers. They wanted to fundamentally restructure galactic civilization according to their own moral standards. The implications were staggering and potentially terrifying. The Carathian Empire had ruled through fear and brutality for over 3 centuries. Their raider fleets terrorized shipping lanes while their armies conquered entire star systems. They had never been successfully challenged because no single power possessed the military strength to oppose them directly. The humans were preparing to do exactly that with a single ship and crew. Human military planning operated on timescales that dwarfed galactic strategic thinking. Where other powers planned operations in terms of months or years, the humans had developed scenarios covering decades and centuries. They were not just fighting individual battles, but attempting to reshape the fundamental structure of galactic politics. The hunt for the Carathian raiders would serve multiple purposes beyond simple justice for their crimes. It would demonstrate human military capabilities to the rest of the galaxy while establishing their credentials as protectors of innocent civilians. It would also provide valuable combat experience against opponents using standard galactic military technology. As the UNSC Indomitable prepared to depart for the Carathian fleet's last known position, Captain Tae-hyun made it clear that this was just the beginning. Human intervention in galactic affairs would continue until justice and order replaced the current system of exploitation and fear. The galaxy was about to learn that a new power had emerged from the darkness of space, and it would not tolerate the abuse of innocent beings. The alien crew of the Stellar Harmony would serve as witnesses to human capabilities and as ambassadors to their respective governments. They would carry the message that cooperation with humanity offered benefits, while opposition would bring consequences that no galactic power could withstand. The age of human dominance was about to begin, whether the galaxy wanted it or not. The Carathian raider fleet dropped out of hyperspace, expecting to find easy targets in the Kepler system, where merchant ships often stopped to refuel and resupply. Instead, they found the UNSC Indomitable waiting for them in a perfect ambush position, with all weapon systems already locked onto their ships. The massive human warship hung in space like a predator that had been patiently stalking its prey through the cosmic darkness. Fleet Commander Minseo Kang stood on the bridge of his flagship Bloodthirst and stared at the impossible sight displayed on his tactical screens. The alien vessel was larger than anything in the Carathian arsenal, and its energy signatures indicated weapon systems that operated on principles his scientists did not understand. His tactical officers were frantically trying to identify the ship's origin and capabilities, but their databases contained no matching records. Captain Tae-hyun Lim's voice cut across all communication frequencies with absolute authority as he offered the Carathian raiders one opportunity to surrender peacefully. He spoke in perfect Carathian, which surprised the raiders since their language was not included in standard galactic translation protocols. The human captain seemed to know everything about their fleet composition and recent activities, including details that should have been classified military secrets. Minseo responded with typical Carathian arrogance and opened fire immediately without attempting to negotiate. The raider fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers and 36 smaller vessels, designed for fast strikes against lightly defended targets. Their plasma cannons and torpedo launchers had terrorized civilian shipping for decades, and no merchant vessel had ever survived a direct engagement with a full Carathian battle group. The human ship's defensive systems activated before the Carathian weapons reached their target. Energy shields flared to life around the Indomitable's hull and absorbed the incoming fire without showing any signs of stress or overload. The alien technology seemed to operate according to physical laws that the raiders did not understand. Their most powerful weapons had no more effect than throwing stones at a mountain. Tactical Officer Haeun Choi coordinated the human response with surgical precision as weapon systems that had been designed to fight interstellar wars engaged targets that were using technology from a previous era. The human particle beam cannons fired in carefully calculated sequences that disabled Carathian ships without destroying them completely. Each shot was placed with accuracy that seemed impossible at such extreme ranges. The alien crew of the Stellar Harmony watched from the Indomitable's observation deck as human warfare unfolded before their eyes. Captain Mireille Kim had seen many battles during her career, but nothing had prepared her for the clinical efficiency of human military operations. There was no chaos or confusion in the human response. Every action was calculated and purposeful, like moves in a complex game. Squadron leader Minseo Ko led her fighters into combat against Carathian interceptors that outnumbered them 5-1. The human pilots wore neural interface helmets that connected their minds directly to their ship's control systems, allowing them to react faster than purely biological reflexes would permit. Their fighters moved through space with impossible precision, dodging enemy fire while delivering their own attacks with devastating accuracy. The Carathian pilots had trained for combat against opponents using similar technology and tactics. They had never faced enemies who could outmaneuver them so completely while simultaneously destroying their ships with weapons that operated beyond their understanding. Human fighter craft seemed to anticipate their moves and respond to threats before the Carathians had even decided to act. Within minutes, half the raider fleet was disabled or destroyed. The surviving Carathian ships attempted to retreat to hyperspace, but discovered that human interdiction technology could prevent faster-than-light travel across an entire star system. The raiders were trapped in normal space with no possibility of escape while facing an opponent whose capabilities seemed unlimited. Chief Engineer Ji-Soo Yoon monitored the battle from the Indomitable's engineering section, where banks of computers calculated targeting solutions and managed power distribution to weapon systems. She explained to the visiting aliens that human technology allowed them to track and engage targets while traveling through hyperspace. No enemy could escape once humans decided to pursue them. The concept of hyperspace pursuit was revolutionary in galactic warfare. All existing military doctrine assumed that retreat to faster-than-light travel guaranteed safety from conventional weapons. Human technology had eliminated that assumption and fundamentally changed the strategic balance of power throughout the galaxy. No fleet could run away from human forces once combat had been joined. The remaining Carathian raiders attempted to use civilian shipping as shields by positioning themselves near a merchant convoy that was traveling through the system. The human response was immediate and decisive. Marine boarding pods launched from the Indomitable and seized control of the civilian ships, while fighter squadrons eliminated the raider escorts with pinpoint strikes that avoided any damage to innocent vessels. The Marine assault teams wore powered armor that enhanced their physical capabilities while providing protection against standard galactic weapons. They moved through the captured merchant ships with speed and efficiency that overwhelmed the Carathian boarding parties who had been attempting to take hostages. The raiders found themselves outgunned and outmaneuvered by opponents who fought with coordinated teamwork. Sergeant Major Gyeong Seo led the assault on the Carathian flagship, where Fleet Commander Min Seo was making his final stand. The raider leader had barricaded himself on the bridge with his senior officers and was threatening to destroy his own ship rather than surrender to alien forces. The human Marines breached the barricades using non-lethal weapons that rendered the defenders unconscious without causing permanent harm. The battle ended with the complete surrender of all surviving Carathian forces. Not a single human had been killed or seriously injured, while the raider fleet had been systematically dismantled with minimal casualties on both sides. The demonstration of human military superiority was absolute and undeniable. No galactic power had ever achieved such a decisive victory against Carathian raiders. Fleet Commander Ji-hoon Park arrived with additional human ships to assist with prisoner processing and salvage operations. The reinforcements included medical vessels equipped to treat wounded Carathians according to human standards of care. The raiders were shocked to discover that their captors intended to provide medical treatment and legal representation rather than simply executing them as pirates. The human approach to prisoner treatment was revolutionary in galactic military practice. Most powers either killed captured raiders or sold them into slavery depending on local customs and economic considerations. The humans insisted that all prisoners had basic rights regardless of their crimes and would receive fair trials according to human legal standards. Captain Tae-hyun explained that human military doctrine emphasized the minimum use of force necessary to achieve objectives. The destruction of the Carathian fleet could have been accomplished in seconds using the Indomitable's full firepower. Instead, the humans had chosen to disable enemy ships and capture their crews alive whenever possible. This restraint was seen as weakness by most galactic powers, but the humans viewed it as a sign of civilized behavior. The psychological impact of the battle extended far beyond the immediate tactical victory. News of the human intervention spread rapidly through galactic communication networks as merchant captains and civilian observers transmitted reports of what they had witnessed. The story of a single alien ship destroying an entire Carathian battle group without suffering any losses seemed impossible, but too many independent sources confirmed the details. Carathian prisoners were transferred to human detention facilities, where they received medical examinations and psychological counseling. Many of the raiders had never experienced treatment by enemies who showed concern for their welfare. Some began to question the values of their own society when confronted with human concepts of individual rights and the possibility of redemption through rehabilitation. The captured Carathian ships were analyzed by human technical teams who documented their weapon systems and tactical capabilities. The information would be used to develop countermeasures against future raider attacks, while also providing insights into galactic military technology. The humans were systematically studying their potential opponents and preparing for larger conflicts. As the UNSC Indomitable prepared to escort the rescued civilian ships to safety, Captain Tae-hyun transmitted a message to all galactic powers monitoring the engagement. He announced that humanity would no longer tolerate attacks against innocent civilians and warned that raiders operating in this region of space would face the same fate as the Carathian fleet. The message was received by intelligence services throughout the galaxy and analyzed by military strategists who struggled to understand the implications of human intervention. A new power had emerged from unknown space and demonstrated the ability to project military force anywhere in the galaxy. The existing balance of power had been fundamentally altered in a single afternoon. The conference room aboard the UNSC Indomitable had been arranged to accommodate beings from multiple species as Captain Tae-hyun Lim made an offer that would reshape the political structure of the galaxy. Representatives from the rescued Stellar Harmony sat alongside human officers as diplomat Yoon-bi Lee outlined humanity's proposal for a new kind of interstellar relationship based on mutual cooperation rather than domination and exploitation. Captain Mireille Kim listened with growing amazement as the human diplomat explained their vision for galactic civilization. The humans were not interested in claiming territory or demanding tribute like traditional military powers. Instead, they offered protection and partnership to any species willing to embrace principles of justice and individual rights that were revolutionary concepts in galactic politics. The human proposal was both simple and radical. They would use their superior military technology to protect peaceful civilizations from raiders and aggressive empires while promoting trade relationships that benefited all participants equally. In exchange, they asked only for diplomatic recognition and cooperation in establishing a network of mutual defense agreements that would eventually span the entire galaxy. Yoon-bi explained that humanity had studied galactic civilization for over a year before revealing their presence and had concluded that the existing political system was fundamentally flawed. Too many species lived in fear of stronger neighbors, while pirates and raiders operated freely in regions where government forces could not provide adequate protection. The strong preyed upon the weak, while authorities either looked the other way or demanded bribes for basic security services. The crew of the Stellar Harmony would become the first official ambassadors between their respective species and the United Nations Space Command. They would carry humanity's message to their home governments and help establish the diplomatic relationships that would form the foundation of a new galactic order based on cooperation rather than conquest. Captain Tae-hyun personally escorted the Carathian prisoners to the human detention facilities, where they would await trial for their crimes against civilian shipping. The facilities were unlike anything the raiders had expected. Instead of torture, chambers or execution blocks, they found clean medical facilities and comfortable living quarters where they received better treatment than most of them had experienced in their own military forces. The human approach to criminal justice was another revolutionary concept that challenged galactic assumptions about punishment and rehabilitation. Where most powers either executed pirates immediately or sold them into slavery, the humans insisted that even criminals possess basic rights that must be respected. Every prisoner received medical care and legal representation while awaiting trial according to human legal standards. Some of the Carathian prisoners began to question the values of their own society when faced with enemies who showed genuine concern for their welfare. They had been raised to believe that strength was the only virtue that mattered, and that showing mercy was a sign of weakness. The humans demonstrated that it was possible to be both powerful and compassionate at the same time. Fleet Commander Min Seo-kang spent hours in conversation with human legal advocates who explained concepts like due process and individual rights that did not exist in Carathian law. He had commanded raider fleets for over 20 years and had never encountered enemies who treated prisoners according to such high ethical standards. The experience forced him to reconsider everything he had believed about the nature of civilized behavior. The captured Carathian ships were turned over to human technical teams who studied their design and construction methods. The information would be used to develop more effective countermeasures against future raider attacks, while also providing insights into galactic military technology that would help the humans prepare for larger conflicts with established powers. Intelligence Officer Hein Jiang coordinated the release of carefully edited footage from the battle to galactic news networks. The videos showed human military capabilities while emphasizing their restraint and concern for civilian safety. The message was clear that humanity possessed overwhelming military superiority, but chose to use it responsibly according to high moral standards. The psychological impact of the battle reports spread throughout galactic civilization faster than official government communications. Merchant captains who had witnessed the engagement told stories in every port they visited about the alien warship that had destroyed an entire Carathian fleet without suffering a single casualty. The tales grew with each retelling, but the core facts remained consistent and undeniable. Trade routes that had been abandoned due to raider activity began to reopen as news of human protection spread through commercial networks. Shipping companies that had written off entire regions as too dangerous for profitable operations started planning new routes through areas where human patrol ships might provide security. The economic implications were enormous as previously isolated colonies gained access to galactic markets. Species that had suffered under Carathian oppression for generations suddenly found themselves with powerful allies willing to challenge the raiders' dominance. Refugee populations that had fled their homeworlds began to speak of returning now that the threat of Carathian retaliation had been eliminated. Hope replaced fear in regions that had known only violence and exploitation for decades. The Phylaxian Council was among the first major powers to request formal diplomatic contact with humanity. The ancient species had built their civilization on principles of peaceful cooperation and had long opposed Carathian aggression without possessing the military strength to resist effectively. They saw human intervention as an opportunity to restore justice to regions under raider control. The Zenthari Empire responded more cautiously to news of human emergence, since their own expansion had often come at the expense of weaker neighbors. They recognized that human military capabilities posed a potential threat to their own territorial ambitions, but also offered opportunities for profitable partnerships if properly managed. Their diplomatic overtures emphasized mutual respect and shared interests. Navigator Sun Wuhan worked with representatives from various species to establish communication protocols and diplomatic procedures that would allow peaceful interaction between humanity and galactic civilization. The humans insisted on treating all species as equals regardless of their military strength or technological capabilities, which was another revolutionary concept in galactic politics. The UNSC Indomitable escorted the repaired Stellar Harmony to its original destination, where the rescued crew disembarked to spread word of their experience throughout their respective communities. Each species would interpret the human message according to their own cultural values, but the basic facts would remain constant regardless of local political considerations. Captain Mirai transmitted her complete log files to the Zenthari government, along with personal testimony about human capabilities and intentions. She emphasized that the humans possessed both the power and the moral authority to reshape galactic civilization according to their own principles. The choice facing every species was simple cooperation or eventual confrontation with a superior military force. Engineer Do-hyun Park returned to his homeworld, carrying technical specifications for human repair techniques that had saved his ship and crew. The Corvin people had always prized engineering excellence and would be fascinated by human approaches to problem-solving that achieved better results with simpler methods. His reports would influence Corvin industrial development for generations. As the Indomitable prepared to depart for its next patrol sector, Captain Tae-hyun broadcast a final message to all listening stations throughout the galaxy. He announced that humanity would continue to expand their operations until justice and order replaced the current system of exploitation and fear. The age of human leadership had begun whether galactic civilization was ready for it or not. The message was received by intelligence services on hundreds of worlds where military analysts struggled to develop strategies for dealing with a power that possessed overwhelming technological superiority but operated according to moral principles that made their actions unpredictable by traditional standards. How do you negotiate with enemies who care more about justice than profit or territory? Trade agreements between human colonies and galactic merchants began to establish economic relationships that would eventually span the galaxy. Human technology was decades ahead of galactic standards in many fields, and their industrial capacity could produce goods that were impossible to manufacture using existing methods. The economic incentives for cooperation were enormous. Military academies throughout galactic civilization began studying human tactical doctrine and trying to develop countermeasures against weapon systems that operated according to unknown physical principles. The task seemed hopeless, since human technology was advancing faster than galactic research could analyze and understand their existing capabilities. The oppressed populations throughout the galaxy looked to the stars with new hope, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, human warships patrolled the void ready to respond when justice demanded their intervention.